Okay, so my neighbor is walking her dog across the street. Nothing suspicious about that. What? It's not my fault that my neighbor just happened to be walking across the street while I'm holding this camera up. Hey everyone, this is Rabbitearsblog and welcome to my in-theater movie review series. So today's movie review I'll be doing today is the Netflix thriller movie, The Woman in the Window. And before I get into my thoughts about this movie, here are a few words from the channel. Alright everybody, it's time to get on the social media train. Want to chat with me in 100 words or less? Then check out my Twitter account. Want to talk about movies, TV shows, and video games within the group? Then check out my Facebook account. Want to check out some of my ultra cool fan art? Then check out my DeviantArt page. Want to get the lowdown on everything that's happening on this channel? Then check all of the above. And now, we return to our regularly scheduled program. So The Woman in the Window stars Amy Adams and Gary Oldman, and is about a young woman named Anna who ends up staying inside her house because she has agoraphobia, which means that she's afraid to leave her house. And why is she staying in her house? She ends up spying on her neighbors and she witnesses an act of violence with the neighbors, and she tries to tell the cops that there's been domestic abuse going on in her neighbor's house, but nobody believes her. So she tries to figure out ways where she could prove that there's been domestic abuse going on at her neighbor's house while trying to save her neighbors at the same time. So what are my thoughts about this movie? Well, let's talk about some of the things I did like about this movie. The first thing I like about this movie was the tension throughout this movie. I love the fact that there was a lot of tension throughout this movie. Like, there were a lot of moments where you're wondering if the neighbors are going to discover that Anna is actually spying on them, and she knows that there's some kind of violence going on in the house, and that she's liable to report the whole thing to the cops whenever she gets the chance to. And then you're also trying to see if the cops will even believe Anna's story, despite the fact that she saw the incident with her own two eyes. So there's a lot of tension going on throughout this movie, as well as a couple of jump scares going on in this movie. Now, usually I don't take well to jump scares because they become this cliche thing in horror movies where you have jump scares happening in every scene, and it just loses novelty within the movie. But in the case of this film, the jump scares are well placed throughout the movie. Like, there were some moments where I was genuinely freaked out by the jump scare that happened. And I like the fact that the jump scares are actually well done in this movie instead of being done frequently throughout this movie. Another thing that I liked about this movie was the premise itself. I love the fact that this movie is about a young woman spying on her neighbors, and she witnesses a domestic abuse going on at the household, and she tries to tell the cops about it, but nobody believes her. So I do like that aspect of this movie, and what would happen if somebody spies on their neighbors and they witness something horrific going on. This movie kind of reminded me a lot of the 1950s movie Rear Window, where the protagonist is also spying on his neighbors, and he discovers a horrific act is being done at his neighbor's house. And that's what I really liked about this movie, is that there's a lot of intensity going on with that type of plot, and the movie does a pretty good job at displaying that intensity throughout the whole film. And then another thing I really liked about this film was Amy Adams' performance as Anna. I like the fact that Amy Adams portrays Anna as being a bit anxious throughout the film due to her agoraphobia. And it's interesting to note that this movie explores what agoraphobia is all about. Let me tell you guys what agoraphobia is about through my cell phone. And basically the definition of agoraphobia is a fear of being in situations where escape might be difficult, or that help wouldn't be available if things go wrong. So it was interesting that I was able to learn the definition of agoraphobia through this movie, and it was interesting how the movie was able to tackle that, and I think Amy Adams did a fantastic job at portraying that type of fear in this movie. Now, here are some issues that I do have with this film. The first issue I have with this film was the pacing. This movie moves at a very slow pace, especially at the very beginning, and I found myself being a bit bored with some scenes because of the slow pacing. So even though there was a lot of tension going on throughout this film that had me sitting at the edge of my seat, there was a lot of slow scenes in this movie that got me a little bored at times, and I wish that the pacing was a bit faster for this film to get me more interested in what's going on overall. And another issue I have with this film was the confusing third act. So, of course, this movie does have a couple of twists in the plot line, and I won't tell you guys what the twists are in the plot line in risk of spoiling the movie for you guys. But anyway, when the plot twists start happening in the film got a lot more confusing, and I found myself wondering what exactly is going on and how do we get to this point in the film, or why this character's motive was suddenly revealed this way. So I was a bit confused with some of the film's plot lines as they started doing the plot twists, and I just kind of wish they handled the plot twist a little better without making the third act of the film so confusing. So overall, I give The Woman in the Window a skim it. Now keep in mind this is a light skim it. It nearly went to the watch it rating, but there was a couple of things that brought this film down for me. And even though this film had slow pacing and the third act was very confusing, I did like the tension throughout this film, and I thought that Amy Adams' performance was fantastically done, and the premise of this movie was really interesting. So if you do like movies that's about the protagonist spying on their neighbors and they realize that something is wrong with their neighbors, then this movie might be for you. However, if you want a movie that has a faster pace and a less confusing storyline, then you might not have a fun time with this movie. So that's my review on The Woman in the Window, and tell me in the comments down below, have you seen this movie? And if you have, did you like this movie? Did you hate this movie? And what were some of your favorite movies where the main protagonist is spying on their neighbor? Please feel free to tell me in the comments down below. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is Rabbitearsblog, and I'll see you guys later.